Hello everybody, this is ManuS and welcome back to the artifact set review. Today it's time to start with the creeps. We're gonna start with the red creeps. Let's roll. Okay, so creeps are basically measured by how well they stack up on the board, especially against melee creeps, and how well they pressure the opponent's lane and how much they cost in relation to all of this. Okay, first one is Bronze Legionnaire. That's one outstanding creep to start with. First of all, it only costs 2 mana, so you can even do something else in the turn. Like if you play it on the first turn, you can potentially play a 1-cost card like a New Orders on a hero, but you're not that likely to use the spare mana. So on turn 1, whether a creep costs 2 or 3 is pretty trivial, but the later the game goes, the more important the fact that Bronze Legionnaire costs only 2 becomes, so you can play multiple spells in one turn. So keep that in mind. And yeah, 4/2/2 makes it stack up perfectly against melee creeps. It just slugs through an army of melee creeps without breaking a sweat, which makes it a really good card, and it also hits the tower quite hard for 4 damage. So yeah, overall an amazing creep, very high pick in Limited, one of the best non-hero cards in red, and even in Constructed this is gonna be a staple creep. Next we have Hellbear Crippler. A negative example of what I talked about. Hellbear Crippler is a 3-cost 3/3, so it's gonna be more clunky to do other things later on in the game if you want to play one. When Hellbear Crippler deals battle damage to a unit, modify that unit with -1 attack. So this basically means it trades cleanly over 2 turns with a melee creep without help. So that's pretty underwhelming, especially for the fact that it only deals 3 damage to a tower if there's no creep in front of it, and also the fact that it costs 3. So this card is more of a filler in Limited and unplayable in Constructed. Next we have Mercenary Exiles. That's a pretty interesting creep because it has a lot going on, which makes sense because it's a rare, so it's a more complex card usually. Every 2 turns you can spend all your gold, and you get to modify Mercenary Exiles with X attack and X health, where X is half the gold spent. Keep in mind, half value of something in artifact is always rounded down, so if you spend 5 gold you get +2 +0 +2. But 2/1/4 already means that it beats a melee creep and survives as a 2/1/2, even without any help, so that's a plus. It's already much better than Hellbear Crippler. It also is a bit better against damage-based sweeper stuff and other small creeps, like for example it ends up losing to a Bronze Legionnaire still, but it has its ability to mitigate that. And yeah, it can grow really big and become a really annoying threat pretty early on, even if you get a gold boost and you don't need the gold to spend on items, and get more out of boosting the exiles. And late in the game, if you have spare gold and have your basic item stuff covered on your heroes, you can just dump your gold into exiles and force the opponent to have a hard way to deal with this, because this can get really hard to deal with. So yeah, more meant for board control and pumping up rather than pressuring the tower with the initial stats, but it can become a really obnoxious tower pusher if you dump some gold into it. Pretty interesting card, and I think it's a pretty good pick in Limited, and a very interesting card in Constructed, as we saw in this week's We Play tournament, where people like Sixo opted to run it as one of their early drops. Next we have Legion Standardbearer, another amazing red creep. Red has a lot of amazing creeps actually. Most of them are pretty great. That's kind of their thing. Legion Standardbearer is an 06 that gives its allied neighbors +4 attack for as long as it is around. So effectively, if you manage to get a creep left and right of it, it's effectively an 8/6 for 4, which is really amazing and has the upside over an actual 8/6 that it can make 2 units, 2 creeps, trade much better than they normally would, so giving you more impact from one card than a single 8/6 might have. But keep in mind it is fragile, like if there's something in front of it, it can kill it quickly and for free. That's the downside for the added impact and flexibility. But yeah, it's a very high pick in limited. It's a very strong card, pushes lanes really well, also makes your melee creeps push in the lane, killing the opposing melee creeps in one blow, creating kind of like a pushing effect. And even in constructed, this is powerful enough to potentially make it into red aggressive or mid-range decks. As exemplified by Stan Cifka's red-black aggressive mid-range deck that had 3 of those. Next we have Rebel Instigator. This card is one of the weaker red creeps, but still not terrible, I would say, but pretty situational. Like in limited, you mostly want to pair this with blue. Cards like Message Rookery and additional combat targeting effects allow you to use this to flank opposing creeps and then create a bunch of these kind of poor man's Retinas Pillager there. But yeah, nothing to write home about and nothing to pick highly, and in constructed I don't think this has any appeal at all. It's just yeah, matching up too poorly against melee creeps, does way too little pressure way too little when there's no blocker in front, and needs way too much help to make up for its weak stats with its ability. Then we have Smeevil Armsmaster, another card that I think is not playable and constructed realistically, but pretty good and limited actually. Effectively you get a 4/2 for 4, which is not great in stats, but the modifying a random hero with +2 attack has a lot more value than 2 attack would have on a creep, because the hero is recurring. It might make the difference between your hero killing theirs and not. So yeah, in draft this is a pretty solid pick, not a super high pick, but like a medium pick in the mid of the pack or something. And definitely a card that should usually make it into your red deck in limited. And in constructed, yeah, too weak. Next we have Stonehall Elite, probably the best non-hero limited card in red. Stonehall Elite, basically Bronze Legionnaire's Elite cousin. You get the same base stats, but on top you get, when it clocks a melee creep over the head and kills it, or any creep for that matter, it gets +2 attack and +2 health after a unit blocking it dies. Which means even if it manages to take down a champion and live to see the day, it will get +2/+2. This snowballs really hard. Once it has +2/+2 as a 6/2/4, it's already super powerful. It pushes towers really hard. It clears everything in its path fairly easily except for heroes. And yeah, it's just a really strong card, and it's also a staple in constructed. The best limited cards usually are also great constructed cards, and a lot of, or I think all of the red-black decks in the tournament that's currently going on had 3 of these. It's kind of one of the reasons to be in red, other than the heroes. Then we have Cursestyr. This card is a bit better than it seems. You get a 5-cost 6/6. You summon a zombie for your opponent after the combat phase in a random position. But first of all, there's not that many 5-drops in a lot of decks in limited. Second of all, 6/6 for 5 is massive stats, and you can always just use this to put it in front of a big opposing creep or a hero with 6 or less health, and just use it as a way to trade with those, and then the downside of Cursestyr never comes up. Then it's just a 5-cost 6/6, which is amazing. And there's also ways to mitigating the downside with Kinfoke Turret, Kinfoke Musket, and other ways to just clear away a random 2/2 with little cost. So yeah, in draft this is much better than it seems. The more aggressive your deck is, the better it is. But even in like defensive decks, you can just use it as a 5-cost card that deals 6 to an enemy in combat, and then trades with it. So yeah, don't shy away too much from this. This is very playable. In constructed though, I don't think it's what you're looking for. Next we have Ogre Corpse Tosser. Not a great card, but an okay filler, I would say, in Constructed. It deals 2 piercing damage to the enemy tower after an allied melee creep dies. You get a 2/10, so it doesn't match up particularly well with the board. It takes like 2 turns to kill an opposing melee creep. It doesn't pressure the tower well if no creeps are dying on your side. So all in all, it is pretty underwhelming and needs a lot to happen for it to pull its weight. So I'm usually not particularly eager to play this in Limited. And I constructed this Judgment spells Doom for it, so let's not even think about it. Next we have Retinas Pillager. That's another really good red creep. It's probably in the like top 3 creeps with Bronze Legionnaire and Stonehall Elite, especially in Limited. In Limited, this can completely take over a lane by itself. Just use this in the lane the opponent abandoned, and then you can even get to 80 pretty quickly with this. This is the single best way for red base decks to deal 80, because red is otherwise usually not very good at dealing 80, but Retinas Pillager makes it possible and can really punish your opponent for thinking that you can't 80 them and completely abandoning the lane that you are winning. And in Constructed, this is still pretty interesting. It's a bit fragile and a bit situational, because the opponent will be better set up to stop it and counter it, and then a 4/2 is not hard to stop if you come prepared, but if you manage to set it up, it can still do the same powerful things as in Limited, just run away with the lane. And in Constructed you might even be more capable of stalling the other 2 lanes while the pillagers run over the 3rd lane. Next we have Kinfoke Golem. That's quite the interesting card. In Limited, I think this only works in the most aggressive, lowest curve decks, but then it's actually pretty nice if you just drop a 6 cost 13/13 on like turn 4 in one lane, because you don't have any other cards in hand anymore, or only one card that you don't care about. This can easily swing that lane and maybe stomp the opposing hero, and then just bash at the tower and win you that lane. But it is very situational and only really makes sense in low curve, very aggressive decks. And in Constructed, basically the same. It's a very situational card, but if you can manage to somehow find a deck that is aggressive and low curve enough that the downside of its play effect is not that relevant, feel free to try it. It could turn out amazing if you can support it properly. Next we have Maro Brawler, another premium limited creep. A 6/16 for 6 is nothing, just need that even outsizes most heroes' basic stats. It's basically better base stats than Kinfoke the Bold and most other red heroes except for the best ones, and therefore beats most heroes at least over 2 turns and some in 1 turn. Is super durable, can survive really long in combat, and also does decent tower pressure. In Limited, this is a great pickup on par with Ogre Conscript, maybe even better. And in Constructed, I have my doubts. I think this is not the type of card you're looking for in Constructed. It's too generic, just beefy stats, and in Constructed you usually look for more utility and specialized stuff than this, I think. But it is a powerful card in terms of cost to stat ratio. And last but not least, we have the aforementioned Ogre Conscript, a 7/7, pushing towers a bit better, beating opposing threats a bit better with 1 more attack, but also being more fragile with the 2 armor and 7 health compared to 16 health. But yeah, another premium card in Limited. Just keep in mind 6 is a lot, and 6 is a slot that you usually have a fair share of cards in, so make sure that you pay attention to your curve. But other than curve concerns, this card is great for its cost. Pressures the tower, pressures heroes, bashes most creeps. Just a very impactful card. It's kind of like adding an additional small hero to that lane effectively. And yeah, in Constructed, I think once again 6 drops of this kind are usually probably not what you're looking for in Constructed. They're just gonna be a bit lower curve, more versatile type cards that you usually want in proactive decks, and reactive decks don't really want a card like Ogre Conscript either, I think. But yeah, maybe I'm wrong about that. We'll see in the future, but I doubt it. Okay, that's the red creeps. Tomorrow we continue, of course, with the green creeps, just like we did with the heroes. So make sure to tune in tomorrow for the next part. If you enjoyed this, please let me know in the comments what you think. Let's discuss my evaluations of the cards. Give me feedback on the content, on how to improve it, on what you want to see in the future, and of course, subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification icon to not miss out on the rest of the series and future Artifact content. You can also find me on social media over here, Twitter, Facebook, and even live streaming on Twitch if you want to catch me there. And if you want to support this content, please make sure to whitelist YouTube or turn off your ad block to help support keep the free content going. You can also find the donation link in the description if you would like to support me that way. I appreciate any form of support, so don't worry about it. That's it again for today. I'm your host ManuS. This was the Artifact set review with the red creeps. Thank you for watching. I see you next time. Bye.